Hey guys, this is Brian here. Excited to be back with you again. Wanted to talk about work and life balance. Enough of you like the blog post that I thought I'd follow through and do the audio version, which is what you're obviously listening to now. Work-life balance for so many of us, it feels like a cruel joke, something that we just can never get on top of. Juggling our personal lives with our professional lives, just kind of making it all work together is incredibly hard. For example, I work with healthcare students and professionals. No matter how hard they try, it's just this endless struggle to keep their training and their work in its place. And even for those of us who maybe spend most of our time at home, it's not necessarily any easier. Honestly, I think stay-at-home parents have one of the toughest jobs on the planet, and they often feel like they've just lost touch with the rest of their lives as they care for their kids. And obviously there's obviously no silver bullet. There's no 3 easy steps to work-life balance. That pretty much ended when Adam and Eve took the fruit when God asked them not to. And life after that just pretty much descended into chaos. So at the same time, even though we're living under the curse, the despair we often feel around this area of balance and margin, that is not coming from God. It's a trick of the enemy who wants us to think that our lives aren't under God's control and that there's no hope. So while perfect work-life balance isn't going to happen in this life, and there really are a lot of things outside our control, God is with us. So let's take a closer look at Jesus' life. Let's think about how we can head toward more sanity, more balance in this area. But I'm going to get into 7 different ways we can learn from Jesus to achieve work-life balance. But before I do that, I want to just say a bit about what it doesn't mean. The Bible certainly doesn't say that Christians shouldn't work hard. We're not achieving balance by being lazy. And God never promises that our lives will feel balanced all the time. That is not in the Bible. So Jesus certainly had days that weren't balanced. You can read Mark 1, where Jesus, it's an intense day. He gives the morning sermon in verse 21. Then he goes on to cast out an unclean spirit. He heals Peter's mother-in-law. And then, just when he's probably ready to wind down and watch a show on TV, he ends up healing everybody in the town who was sick or demon-possessed. So, Jesus did not always live a life of balance. I remember one time I was at church. Missionary was giving the sermon that morning. He was a seminary professor who was really looking forward to slowing down and just kind of easing his way into retirement. And instead, God called him unexpectedly to the missions field, and he winds up working 70-hour weeks. And so I'm not going to say he's not following God. He's doing God's will, but it doesn't look like the kind of work-life balance that we would like. So we can't demand something God doesn't promise. His best life for us might really be a hard and exhausting one. But at the same time, alongside the exhaustion, the hard work, the Bible offers us deep rest. And part of that is a weekly Sabbath. You can read about that in Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5. But also the internal rest of freedom that comes with having our sins forgiven, and to know that we can talk to God directly because of what Jesus did for us. Hebrews 4, 1 through 16 kind of addresses that through the theme of rest. So let's dive into the heart of this today. 7 ways to achieve work-life balance like Jesus. Okay. The first is have some fun. It's fascinating to me, for his first miracle, Jesus turns water into wine at a wedding that probably lasted an entire week. he was literally the life of the party. And so, by way of application, do you need to be more intentional about making room for fun, hobbies, or leisure in your life? John 2 gives us permission to do that. And I think for most of us, even though we wouldn't say fun is wrong, we very rarely make time for it. Number 2, view your life as a whole. Don't compartmentalize it. You know, if you look at Jesus' life, he never really went to work. So he never set it aside either. So in John 2, to go back to that, was Jesus working or was he partying? You might kind of say, well, he was partying, you know. Weddings were a huge deal. Jesus had a good time. But on the other hand, let's not forget, his disciples were with him too, like they always were. And so we can assume he was being intentional, he was pouring into them. And that was frankly a lot of work and probably not entirely fun. And so it says that when he turned the water into wine, it manifested or revealed his glory, and then his disciples believed in him. So he was being intentional. He had a purpose in the party. He was having fun, but it was kind of work too. And so as you read the Gospels, you just never get the sense that Jesus thought of his life in these distinct buckets or silos like we do. Instead, everything he did, it was always in response to what his Father was showing him. You can read more about that in John 5:19 or 8:29. And so how would following Jesus' example of just doing whatever God is doing in the moment that you happen to be in, how would that change the way you feel about the different buckets in your life? What would happen if you just followed Jesus instead of thinking of your life in distinct buckets? I know it's not that simple, but hopefully you get the point. Number 3, be intentional. Just because Jesus didn't carve up his life into work and non-work doesn't mean he never took a breather. Right after his crazy day of overwork, Jesus kind of pulls back at the end of Mark chapter 1. But it didn't just happen. You know, he had to get up early, it says, while it's still dark, and everybody else was still catching some Z's. For you, where do you need to become more proactive and more intentional about injecting margin into your life? Number 4, get away. Continuing on with Mark 1, verse 35, it just says Jesus went to a desolate place. You know, he's alone, he's off the grid, there's no Wi-Fi, he doesn't have mobile service, nobody can find him there. Are there times where you make yourself truly inaccessible? How can you build that into your daily, weekly, or even monthly routine? And just practically putting it on the calendar, maybe even setting a notification or a reminder, telling your family, whoever you need to tell, you know, make it happen, get away. It's a choice. Number 5, talk with God. Mark simply says that there in that desolate place, Jesus prayed. Making prayer a priority was one of the secrets for Jesus keeping perspective, margin, and balance. And so what about your prayer life? I mean, we all believe in it, but it's so easy for our prayer life to just become an add-on. You know, pray for a minute as we fall asleep and, you know, for 2 minutes as we race out the door. And then we wonder why we don't feel connected to God. So, you know, what about your prayer life? Has it become a little boring and routine? Has it become so minimal that it doesn't mean much? And so, I don't know what your circumstances are, or what's possible for you, but I want to challenge you to carve out an extended time when you can to have an honest conversation with the Lord and to expect to receive the help you need for a new beginning. And maybe you just need to set a really small goal for yourself that over time you're going to increase. I know for me, honestly, even though I'm a pastor, I was struggling to pray significantly at work. And I've learned that I have to set aside time for it during my workday, or I just get swallowed up by my inbox, by the other things I need to kind of execute on. But the reality is that prayer and following Jesus so that his life can flow through me are hugely important, and I just have to make time to talk with him. All right, 2 more. Number 6, let others come to you. Jesus is really the only truly indispensable person who ever lived, right? His teaching, his grace, his ability to heal put him in constant demand. And at the same time, again in Mark 1, he apparently was fine with letting people and everybody, it says, kind of go on a wild goose chase to track him down. And so in love and in the right situations, it's fine to make ourselves hard to find. If people really need us, they'll track us down, like Peter did here. And so for you, how and when do you need to make yourself harder to find so that you can have time with the Lord, time to reflect, time to have balance? And if I can just say quickly, a lot of us are real people pleasers. Sometimes we have, I'll call it a savior complex. What I mean is we like to be important. We like to be the one people rely on. And so those things can make it harder for us to pull back, but we need to do it. All right, last one. Number 7, leave things undone. When they finally caught up with Jesus, they said to him, hey, everybody's looking for you. And Jesus says to them, let's go on to the next towns that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out. And it's implied that everybody was looking for him because they wanted him to keep healing, teaching, etc. But surprisingly, Jesus jumps on the next train and gets out of town, and he allows those needs to go unmet. At first we might be like, Jesus, what? Why? But he knows what he's doing. He has a clear sense of his calling, and he knows he needs to preach to other towns. And the bigger yes, his sense of calling allowed him to say no to good but lesser things. So ask yourself honestly, by way of application, first, are you possibly overworking? Ask others who are close to you. They'll be honest with you. And then make a list of quick things that overwhelm you and maybe could be left on. Pick one and start doing it today. Choose 2 more and stop doing them within 2 weeks. And obviously you may need to talk to others if your choices will impact them. So in closing, the key to finding more work-life balance in most things really is not getting everything right. It's taking those small, concrete steps that really, really will add up over time. What would your life be like 6 months from now if once a week, once a month, you took a small step instead of kind of telling yourself, I don't even have time to think about this, or I don't have choices. So what is the one idea you're going to take away from this and put it into practice? And I just want to encourage you practically to put a reminder on your calendar or your phone so you don't forget. This, guys, is totally a fight worth fighting. I really think we're going to look back on our lives and this kind of moment in history and say that we as a culture do not see clearly in terms of having a balanced life. But with God's help, following Christ's example, we can keep making progress. So let's do it together. Be blessed, guys.